Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Coming Distractions brought to you by the Nerdpocalypse Podcast. I'm your host, Jay. I'm here with my co-host, Micah.
Hey.
All right, guys. This is our review. This is our spoiler-free review for The Marvels. This is obviously the 2023 follow-up to Captain Marvel, starring Brie Larson. This time it's starring Brie Larson, Teyonah Parris, Imani Vellani, Zawe Ashton, and Gary Lewis, amongst many, many other people, and of course Samuel L. Jackson. This is the 33rd film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is wild, and this movie was directed by Nia DaCosta, who a lot of people might know from the latest version of Candyman she did a couple years ago. So, all right, again, spoiler-free review. I'll go first. Look, I enjoyed the movie overall. I didn't think it blew the doors off by any measure. I think it is a solid entry into the MCU. Certainly not in the upper echelon, certainly not in the lower echelon of MCU movies, but I think it's a solid entry. I think the sort of film debut of Miss Marvel and I guess Photon, however they're going to decide on that, making their leap from the Disney Plus series into the actual to the big leagues in the movies, I thought were pretty good. I thought especially Miss Marvel is a real crowd pleaser. People seem to, at least in the screener I was in, seem to enjoy her and her perspective as like this kid hero inside the universe now, looking up to all of these characters that we've pretty much grown up with at this point. So yeah, overall I enjoyed it. The villain is okay, not amazing. The overall story, as far as the superheroics, is pretty boilerplate, I would argue, with a little bit of a twist, which is kind of interesting. Kind of dealing with the actions of a hero screwing something up, and then trying to kind of those actions trying to atone for them ultimately, right? Which is an interesting arc for the for Captain Marvel. But all in all, the superheroics are pretty boilerplate. The interaction between the main three leads is where the meat of the story really is. And I think that part is done pretty well. I'm glad that's what they concentrated on largely. I think for where the superheroics kind of falter, that's where the movie gets kind of a bit of a boost. So all in all, I liked it. But again, it's a solid entry into the MCU. Micah, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's I enjoyed myself. It's like you said, it's right there in the middle of the bell curve. It's it's solid. It's not offensive. It's not outstanding. It's kind of Marvel doing what everyone used to criticize Marvel for. Like one of the big criticisms from these Marvel Studios movies is that they were too samey. Right? Like there were a couple of big criticisms. One, they're too samey. They all feel the same. Two, all the villains are weak. And then people people complained about that. Like they need to do something different. And now this phase is nothing but different. And people are like, well, the MCU's dead. And it's terrible. And so
like pick one.
So I guess they went back to the drawing board and said, oh, okay. You don't like all this like somewhat experimental, stuff. We're gonna break out the old mold and we're gonna make some new content in that mold. Right. And that's what this is. It's heavy on character interaction. It's little light on story with a sprinkling of an antagonist there, just because you need to have someone that the good guys can go against, right? That's what this movie is. And it, like, if you go in expecting that, that's what you're going to get. A friend of mine, she said that this is very much a lady movie. And when she said that, I didn't understand. Yeah, I'm like, what the fuck does that mean, right? But after seeing it, I get it, right? Whereas the first Captain Marvel is more of a girl power movie, and like Captain Marvel is like, the film is like, I'm a girl, deal with it, right? Like this movie is more like catering. It's not a. The first movie is more of a I'm a girl, deal with it, and this movie is more of, hey, we got stuff to deal with, and we just happen to be women, right?
Yeah, and they know their demographic too, right? Like they know
Right.
that
They know their
there's strong,
demographic.
right? They know there's and look, I recognize that the following statement is going to be taken terribly by people who want to purposely take it terribly. Um, it knows that its demographic is young women. It knows that Kamala Khan's character represents a lot of the audience who is excited to see this, and they play
She
to
is
that.
the point of view character, right?
She's the
Like
point of view character, and I
this
know,
movie,
right?
this movie feels like a sequel to Ms. Marvel.
Yes, more than anything. Absolutely.
Right.
So does that mean that you have to watch that series? No. But if you watch that series, I think that perspective becomes much more rich, right? Like you can go, oh, okay, yeah, I got where they're going, right? And so like they know who their audience is. They know what the big block of that demographic that they're really trying to grab at, and like, you know, I mean, with all of this stuff, right? Like let's not pretend what this really is. It's like we got to sell T-shirts. We're like, we got to get that IP seeped into the core of your brain so that when you see a Miss Marvel T-shirt, you got to have it, right? You got to get the pop vinyls and all this other stuff, right? Like that's ultimately what all of these IPs are, right? This is not just Marvel. That is just any comic book movie, any of that stuff, right? And so they understand what their audience is, and they're shooting for that, and they're shooting for it pretty hard. Like I said, there's going to be a demographic of people who either hear this or seem to like just kind of gravitate towards this perspective I want to talk about, which is that's a bad thing because it's not aimed at me because I am not in that demographic. It's not a bad thing. It's that Black Panther is aimed at a very specific demographic as well, and that movie is great. And if you happen to like that movie, great, get on board. The train's moving, right? But the train ain't aimed at you. Right? It's like that train was aimed at Black people and it hit dead on target and Black people loved it. White people who saw it and non-Black people who saw it were like, this movie's dope. I love it. The more the merrier. Like we're all going in the same direction. But they had a very specific intent. This was a very specific intent. Captain Marvel was a very specific intent. But like you said, it was more of like, I'm a woman, you're going to deal with that. And like right in your face, right? Because it was the first woman superhero inside the MCU, right? As far as a solo picture, right? Obviously, Black Widow was there before anybody. But this one very much feels like, all right, we're aiming at women, young women very specifically. Let's fucking do this thing, right? And I can appreciate that. I like that. I don't mind because I am a mature adult that people are being catered to so that they can also be brought into the fold. That's how these things make $1 billion, right? They don't make $1 billion just catering to the same demographic as always. So I appreciate
that's how fandom stays. That's how fandom stays fresh. That's how IP stays alive. That's how you can't keep making the same movie over and over again because then you'll complain about it. And then they'll give you something different, and then you'll complain about it and yearn for the thing that you once loved.
Complained, and then also complained about, right? So I think overall this is a good move. So let's quickly talk about, before we get out of here, let's quickly talk about where this movie lives in the overarching story, which I think is important, right? Which is, where does it live in the multiverse saga? Right, because the biggest criticism that's happening with the MCU right now is, where is anything going? I don't really see the big story, right? And if you know the comics and stuff like that, you obviously get where it's going. But I think a lot of people don't know that because the vast majority of people are just, Joe Sixpack, right? It deals with the multiverse in a way that is sort of ancillary. It's not a big part of the story like Doctor Strange was, right? Or, the sequel to Doctor Strange was, which was like all multiverse, like this is what's happening, right? Even as confusing and weird as that was. This deals with it, but it deals with it in like one specific moment, and it's a big moment, and you just go, oh, okay, I get it, right? And I think that's actually maybe the better way to handle this, is not to dump all of this like exposition and all of this shit about the multiverse onto people because a lot of people don't get it. But the way they handle it, it was like one moment. Oh, if you pay attention to this one moment, you understand what's happening. And I think that's a clever way of dealing with this. And then you can spread out the rest of it across movies and then get people back on board. So it's not a main part of the story, but it's enough that you can understand it.
Yeah, it's well said. I want to focus a little more on the movie for a second and just talk about some of these performances. I think Iman Vellani is absolutely adorable in this movie. Like I said, she plays Ms. Marvel, and she is your point of view character, and she and her family are the heart of this movie. They kind of put this movie on their backs.
100%.
I'm sitting there and I'm watching this young actor as she is in this character, knowing that this actor is also a huge fan of like this whole thing that she's in, and like. I'm happy and I'm smiling and I'm like, this is it. Like, this is why these movies exist, right? Like, they don't necessarily exist for me, right? Like, they exist for these young kids, just like the comic books and the Spider-Man movies of the early 2000s and the X-Men of the early 2000s. There's just like those movies existed for me. Like, these movies exist for them. So to see this actor in this, like, just full of joy and is giddy, and I love it, right? And to see how Brie Larson plays Captain Marvel this time around she has personality, right? Like,
which is on purpose. That's the arc of that character, right?
Right. Like you can kind of hand wave it away in the first movie, like, oh, well, she, people mess with her head and stuff like that. So she didn't really know who she was. So she was just kind of like a Terminator.
They literally gave her the name the Annihilator in this, which I thought was funny. It's like, yeah, she kind of was. It's like an emotionless robot with superpowers.
Right. But she's an actual person now.
Yeah.
With feelings, with emotions, with I wouldn't call her complex, but she's like, she is a character now and not just the Annihilator. Look, Tiana Paris, I think I think Tiana Paris is a wonderful actor. I've seen her in better stuff. Right, like I've seen her do better in other 100%. Things. Yeah, so this is not necessarily the thing that is going. If you've never heard of this woman, like, don't judge her acting. Don't judge, her performance based off of the material that she has. Right, like I feel like she's like, of the three leads, I feel like she's the third lead.
I would argue that's accurate. Yeah, I don't know that I didn't dislike necessarily what they did with her, but there was
not at all.
There, like, I'll tell you offline why I missed a part of the very important dialogue. Why I'll say it now. A fight broke out in the middle of my theater. I tried to go help somebody, so I missed. Yeah, it was like fucking wild. So I missed like a minute or two of that dialogue, which I was really annoyed. I'm like, it couldn't have been like just a general action sequence. But they tried really hard to make the point of like to add the tension between her and Carol. And like why they had like this weirdness, and I thought it was pretty good, but not great.
I thought it was very ham-fisted. I thought that I don't necessarily need it to be set up, but I feel like they did as best of a job as they could. To because you have to take into account that like maybe people don't watch everything, right? So even if they did set it up I would have preferred they set that kind of relationship up, and maybe they did. Maybe I just can't remember, but it felt a little ham-fisted. But I'm not saying that like the movie needed extra time. No, there's like people
I
was
actually thought the
talking
time
about how
worked. I
people were talking about how like, oh, this is the shortest MCU movie. Oh, something must be wrong. Nope, no.
No, I didn't think so.
For this movie, the pacing was great. We need more movies like this, quite frankly,
Yeah,
from the MCU and from these superhero movies. These superhero movies don't need to be fucking epics, right? Like,
they don't.
it takes 15 minutes to read a comic book story, and that's if you read slow. So
Right.
these
Yeah, that's
movies
why
don't.
like these prices are ridiculous. I'm like, I'm done.
So these movies don't need to be 2.5 to 3 hours long.
No.
So
I see the justification on something like an Endgame or an Avengers movie. I'm not mad at that because there's a lot of characters to throw around and bring in from different perspectives. That all makes sense. But like a standard sequel, no, it does not need to be
right.
90 minutes. I'll give you 2 hours tops. Like I don't need 245 on a standard Doctor Strange 3. I don't need it. Like it's unnecessary. And that's where stories feel bloated. I didn't feel like the runtime. I was like, damn, this is over already. Like I felt like it was paced properly, like totally fine. I do find it interesting that going back to your point about how Carol Danvers is a very different character, right? Like this go round, right? And I had alluded to this idea of like she makes a mistake and like she's trying to like kind of come to terms with it and pay this like pittance for it. The whole idea is that at the end of the first movie where she left and she was like, I'm going to go kill the super intelligence. Like, yeah, she did it. And like she fucking flew to Hala, the planet of the Kree, and she killed the super intelligence, right? And it kind of threw their entire planet into disarray, right? And so the movie deals with the aftermath of that. Like, and that's why they call her the Annihilator, because they're like, you basically killed our planet, dude. Like, and they don't know the context of why she did what she did. And she doesn't know the full ramifications of why she did what she did until well after it. And like that idea of her trying to make amends, that's what makes characters rich, right? That shows a character growth that she's like, oh shit, like, yeah, I did it. And I did it for what I felt like were justifiable reasons. And I would argue they were. But like being a hero isn't just a black and white thing. Like your actions do, in fact, matter long term, right? They affect other people down, sort of down the line. And so I like that they humanized her in that way, but they also used Kamala Khan to humanize her. Like, dude, when you fuck up, you should say you're sorry. And she was just like, oh, shit. Like, yeah, you're right. Because she had been a robot for so fucking long. And
right.
Again, I think you're right. You can hand wave that away that people were messing with her head. I think it's easy to do that because the writing is not nearly as strong in the first movie as it is comparative to this movie. So, but I like that they dealt with those three characters kind of coming together. Again, it's a bit ham-fisted between Carol and Monica, but it's there, and I think they didn't finish it. So that's good. Like that relationship shouldn't get tied up in 90 minutes and be like, everything's perfect again. Like you need to give that another movie to really come together. Cause like you get a moment, like not a moment, you get a couple moments of them working together once their powers are, spoiler alert, like detangled, right? And they can actually fight alongside each other. But you really it's still the budding moments of a team, right? It's like you get, it's the difference between watching the Avengers fight together in the first Avengers movie, and then when they show up and they fight together in Age of Ultron, you're like, oh, these motherfuckers have been practicing. Like, there's a huge, there's a visual difference in how they interact with each other. And I think that's where we are, and I like that aspect. Like, you don't have to solve that whole story, tie it up in 90 minutes. So there's plenty of stuff to still explore with them.
Also, what a good idea to kind of mitigate this, these are some of the most powerful characters, like in terms of power set.
Yeah, three of them
in this entire right. So, what a good idea to mitigate that by saying, hey, if you use this, like it's going to affect somebody else and you just won't be as effective, right? Because like theoretically, if their powers were fine, right, Captain Marvel could just handle this, right?
Yeah, like she don't need nobody else.
Like, right. But I think that's very clever how they were able to figure out a way to mitigate that so that you have to actually, think and use your, be so you could be characters, right? And not just like you said, like some dumb, robots that quite literally an American weapon interfering in foreign affairs, right? I mean, also, like, get your politics out of my comic books or whatever. Right there, like, that's literally it, yo. Like, it's right
a war between. It's a deeply long-rooted war between two groups of people. A bit of like a religious aspect to both of them. Like. They look different to each other, but I would argue, like, to the outside, it's just a green guy and a blue guy.
They're all aliens to me, right?
Like, over there, right? They got this long-standing war, and here we come with our the biggest gun we have, and being like, could you just go over there and change shit? Right? Like, I know it's a bit ironic with the fucking Captain America shield behind me, but again, subtext is all right there, guys. It's not hard to figure out. I don't know. I mean, like, I believe the line goes, ripped from the headlines. Like, it's not fucking hard to understand. But like, it's funny. I would love at some point to just make a list. We should make a video and just go through the MCU and be like, what is the thing that they're trying to tell you that people just do not get? Like, it's because this one, it's pretty obvious. And they take a stance. Man. And they take a stance. They're like, we should probably not do that, and we should totally apologize with the fact that we fucked things up. Just saying. Like, no big deal. We should probably try to help. Because we really probably shouldn't have done what we did. Like, it's kind of fucked up. But again, I feel like people just right over my ball head, right?
We should help these people who are refugees and from this other invading force. And we should help that invading force because, like our policies have kind of screwed things up for them. I mean, it's just, maybe I'm reaching, but I don't think I am. Right? Because, like,
by the way,
she's not.
We keep moving the refugees to different places and telling them to move. Like, again, it's not that fucking hard. It's really not that hard, guys. It's really not that hard.
And look. I mean, it's kind of coincidental, right? Because like Nia DaCosta and her writing team aren't clairvoyant, right? Like they didn't write this story around current events, but like these events have been happening for a very, very long time.
I don't they didn't have to pluck it out of the fucking thin air. They were like, what has been happening for a long time? I don't know. How could we figure this out? I don't know. It's funny. It's about gaining resources and all this other stuff and where people live. It's crazy. So I liked it. Again, it's not blowing the doors off. It's a good middle of the road MCU movie, which I think is okay. I think it's okay. And by the way, I think it's actually going to do probably financially quite well. I know people are weirdly concerned about that. But I think it probably will.
I never knew why. I never know why people are concerned about that. Unless you're like a stockholder, like what do you care?
Yeah,
one, it's going to make money that you're not. One, it's going to make money that you're not going to see. Or two, it's not, and they probably won't make any more, and then you've got nothing to worry about. So
yeah, I don't.
I don't understand it. But there are a couple things that. So the movie is solid. It's not going to be for everybody. Like if you are the type of person that like, if a man's not the lead, you're not going to like it. Then you're not going to like it, right? Like it's just that. Yeah. I'm not here to judge you. It just you probably won't like the movie. Like I'm thinking of a myriad of people that will not be into this movie, and they all have one thing in common, right? But if you're, if you, it's a solid movie. It's okay. You don't have to rush out to see it, but you won't be mad that you did rush out to see it.
Right.
There are two things at the end. There's the last scene, which is very, very interesting and has implications for where things are going to go in the immediate term. And then there's a mid-credit scene where that has implications for where things could go at a slightly further out term. And I feel like Marvel Studios looked at all the MCU is dead stuff, and I'll never watch the MCU. I feel like they saw that and they said, "Here's a mid-credit scene." They threw it on the table, and you done with us? No, I'm not done with you.
Yeah.
And because you'll be back. And it's like that. It's like that song in Hamilton, the Kings. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You'll be back. Like, you will. And guess what? They're not wrong. They're not wrong.
I don't think they're wrong.
It's a little bit of a like dick on the table type of thing. Like, you talking shit? Like, who's talking shit all that? Who writing all these articles? What you gonna do? Are you not gonna come? Yeah, you are. Shut up. Knock it off. Look, but those two scenes, right? And obviously we'll talk about them in the spoiler review. But those two scenes, they are dealing with two things that we've long talked about. Look, I'll say it right now. It's the first we have done 580 full show episodes. This is the first time this has ever happened. It's the infamous double, dude, we told you. Like, yeah, we told you. So if you are a long time listener, dude, we told you 2 times. Like, and I like both of these things, and they touch to very different parts of the MCU audience, right?
Like they're trying to please everybody.
They hit on too, but not in a way of like, please like us. It's like, no. Here's a thing for you. And everyone's like, I really like that. And it was like, and here's the thing for you. I really like that. And the second one, I think everyone is going to love, but there's a very small, or not small, but there's a very specific sect of MCU fans that are going to love it because of like the people involved. I'll just say that. Like, the people involved really matters. And when you see it, you're like, yeah, okay, God damn it. Like, yeah. And so that matters a lot. And I think it's cool that they are doing the way they're doing it, right? Like, these are two aspects that need to be dealt with straight up, and they're dealing with them straight up. Like, we're not fucking around anymore. If you've been wondering about this stuff, here it is. So, yeah. It's not hard to figure out, but you got to see it for yourself. And don't watch it on some shitty nonsense. Go see it in the theater. Like, you know what I mean? Don't watch it on, I watched it on YouTube and I wasn't impressed. Go see it in the theater because it matters. That part actually does matter. All right, that is it for our spoiler-free review for the Marvels. Look, if I have to give it a score, I know you don't like to do that, but if I have to give it a score out of 5, it's a 7.5 out of 5 for me.
A 7.5 out of 5?
Out of 10. Sorry, bad math. 7.5 out of 10. Out of 5. It's amazing. It's the greatest movies ever existed. No, 7.5 out of 10 for me.
For me, it's better than Captain Marvel. If you liked Ms. Marvel, you're gonna like this. And if Ms. Marvel wasn't your thing, this will not be your thing.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That's my take on it.
All right.
It's solid, though. I do recommend you watch it.
All right. So there you go. We will see you guys next time. Bye.
See ya.